Hey, step away from the door, right now!
I'm sorry, what is this about?
I'm not gonna ask you again. Hands where I can see them.
Can you tell me why you're stopping?
Because I said so. You want to make this difficult. I did
At 9:14 a.m. on a Tuesday in March in downtown Hartford, Connecticut, a man was handcuffed on the public sidewalk outside the headquarters of First Covenant Bank, the institution he had led for 11 years, whose board he chaired, and whose annual budget included the line item that funded the Hartford Police Department's entire overtime program. His name was Cornelius Aldous Beaumont, and he was 58 years old. He was born in 1966 in Bridgeport, Connecticut, the second of 4 children raised by Doretha Beaumont, a licensed practical nurse who worked double shifts at Bridgeport Hospital for 34 years, and Elwood Beaumont, a tool and die machinist who lost his left index finger to a press at age 44 and went back to work the following Monday because the family couldn't absorb the lost wages. They owned their home. They were not wealthy. Yeah, they were, as Cornelius would later describe them in a commencement address at Howard University, people who did not confuse struggle with failure. Cornelius graduated valedictorian from Bassick High School in 1984. He received a full academic scholarship to Morehouse College, where he studied economics and political science, graduating summa cum laude in 1988. He went on to earn his MBA from the Wharton School at the University of Pennsylvania in 1990, finishing in the top 4% of his class. He was recruited simultaneously by Goldman Sachs, J.P. Morgan, and a small regional development bank in Hartford called First Covenant Community Bank, an institution founded in 1953 specifically to serve Black and Latino families who were systemically denied loans by mainstream lenders. He took the job at First Covenant. His colleagues at Wharton thought he was insane. One told him, frankly, that he was leaving 7 figures on the table. Cornelius told him, with the same calm he would display 32 years later on a sidewalk, some tables are worth more than the money on them. He spent the next 2 decades building First Covenant from a $40 million community institution into a $2.3 billion regional powerhouse with branches in 7 states. He structured financing for 14,000 first-generation homeowners. He created a loan program that disbursed $180 million to small businesses owned by people of color between 2008 and 2022. He served on the boards of the Hartford Symphony, St. Francis Hospital, the Connecticut Community Foundation, and the Hartford Police Foundation, the last of which had, under his chairmanship, donated $1.4 million toward body camera equipment and de-escalation training for the Hartford Police Department. He had been named to Forbes' list of the 100 most influential Black executives 3 times. He had testified before the Senate Banking Committee. He had received the NAACP's Economic Justice Award in 2019. He had spoken at the White House. He drove a 2019 Volvo XC60. He still lived in Hartford. He still called his mother every Sunday at 6 p.m. His one core principle, stated in every speech he had ever given, was this: you do not earn the right to walk away from the place that made you. You earn the right to go back and make it better. On the morning of March 14th, he had woken at 5:45 a.m., made coffee, reviewed overnight briefings from the bank's risk management team, and eaten oatmeal with blueberries at his kitchen table while reading the Hartford Courant. He had called his CFO at 7:30 to confirm a board meeting agenda. He had changed into a charcoal wool suit, not bespoke, but quality, a white dress shirt, and a burgundy tie. He had driven downtown and parked in his reserved space in the bank's private garage. He had taken the elevator to the executive floor, reviewed a loan portfolio summary with his assistant, Marceline Okafor, and then, at 9:08 a.m., walked back down to street level to personally greet a delegation from the Hartford Small Business Alliance that was arriving at the main entrance. He was standing on the public sidewalk in front of his own bank's front door, in his own city, in his own suit, with his own name on the building directory when the patrol car pulled up. But its Officer Derek J. Pruitt was 41 years old, with 14 years on the Hartford Police Department. Before Hartford, he had spent 4 years with the Meriden Police Department, where he had accumulated 6 formal complaints from residents, all targeting Black men, all alleging stops without cause, all dismissed following cursory internal review. He was not disciplined. He was not flagged. When he transferred to Hartford in 2009, his file arrived clean. In Hartford, he had accumulated an additional 11 complaints in 14 years, all dismissed. 9 of the 11 named Black men as the subjects of stops. 7 described the same behavioral pattern. A Black man, in a space Pruitt's documented pattern, suggested he believed Black men did not occupy without suspicion, bank lobbies, country club parking lots, office building entrances, hotel lobbies. In one complaint, filed in 2017 by a black cardiologist named Dr. Marcus Ellington, Pruitt had demanded the doctor prove he worked at Hartford Hospital while the doctor stood in his own scrubs at his own car in the hospital's physician parking structure. That complaint was dismissed when Pruitt's supervisor wrote, in the official record, Officer Pruitt reported observing behavior consistent with casing the area, insufficient grounds for formal action. Dr. Ellington was, at the time, chief of cardiothoracic surgery. Pruitt had received 3 commendations for proactive community policing, a phrase that, in his evaluations, was used as a synonym for high contact volume. His quarterly numbers were excellent. He was praised in roll call. He was given favorable shift assignments and approved for consistent overtime. He was, in the language of the department's internal culture, a producer. His partner on March 14th was Officer Glenn Tassos, 38, 9 years on the force, with no formal complaints and a reputation for saying nothing when Pruitt acted and everything when they were alone. The junior officer in the adjacent unit, who would park behind them 2 minutes into the stop, was Officer Priya Nair, 27, in her second year, who had never questioned a senior officer and who would, by 11 p.m. that same night, do the most important thing she had ever done in her professional life. At 9:12 a.m., Officer Derek Pruitt was 4 minutes into a slow patrol roll past the 1400 block of Main Street when he observed a black man in a suit standing outside the main entrance of First Covenant Bank. He did not observe the man doing anything. He did not observe a crime in progress. He did not receive a call. He was not flagged by dispatch. The man was standing still on a public sidewalk. Pruitt pulled to the curb at 9:13 a.m. Tassos said nothing. Body cameras were activated, though neither officer noted the activation aloud. Camera angle 1, Pruitt's body camera. It shows Pruitt exiting the vehicle and approaching Cornelius Beaumont with his right hand already on his belt, not on his weapon, but on his cuffs. His approach is not cautious, it is decisive. He has made a determination. The footage shows him speaking before he has fully closed the distance. He does not identify himself as law enforcement. He does not state a reason for the stop. He gives a command. Camera angle 2. The exterior camera mounted above First Covenant Bank's main entrance. A wide shot. And it shows the patrol car pulling up. It shows Pruitt's approach and body language. Squared, aggressive, angled forward. It shows Cornelius Beaumont turn toward the officer with his hands at his sides, then raise them slightly, palms visible, in the universal posture of a person who has been stopped before and knows the protocol. Camera angle 3. The ATM surveillance camera positioned across the street at First National Credit Union. This camera, aimed at the opposite sidewalk, captures the entire sidewalk in front of First Covenant. It will later become the most legally significant footage because of its unobstructed, unaffiliated, continuous recording. It captures everything that follows with remarkable clarity. Camera angle 4. The dash cam of a FedEx delivery truck parked 40 feet north. The driver, Marcus Webb, 44, will later testify that he saw the stop and immediately activated his personal cell phone camera as secondary capture. He will also testify that before he began recording, he heard Officer Pruitt say something that made him stop and stare. His delivery route app will confirm he was stationary for 17 minutes. What followed was this. Cornelius Beaumont, responding to Pruitt's demand for hands, complied immediately. He was calm. He spoke in full, measured sentences. He stated that he was Cornelius Beaumont, that he was the chairman and CEO of First Covenant Bank, that this was the bank's headquarters, that he was on the public sidewalk awaiting a scheduled delegation, and that he had not done anything to give rise to a lawful stop. He asked, by name, for the legal basis of the stop. Pruitt told him to stop talking. Beaumont said, calmly, "I have a right to know why I'm being stopped. That's not resistance. That's a constitutional question." Pruitt told him he was acting suspicious. Beaumont asked him to define suspicious. Pruitt told him that a man loitering in front of a bank fit a pattern. Beaumont noted still calmly that he was not loitering, that the building behind him was his bank, and that he could provide identification if the officer required it. Pruitt told him to turn around. "Am I being detained or am I free to go?" "Turn around." "Officer, I am asking you a specific legal question. Turn around or I will turn you around." Beaumont turned. His hands were visible throughout. He did not run. He did not raise his voice. He did not reach for anything. He turned slowly, hands raised, and placed them behind his back when instructed. Pruitt handcuffed him on the sidewalk in front of his own bank at 9:17 a.m. At this point, two community witnesses became active participants in the preservation of evidence. The first was Colonel Raymond Osei, retired, 67, who had served 28 years in the United States Army and now operated a financial consulting firm 2 blocks north. He was walking to his office when he saw the stop. He immediately recognized Cornelius Beaumont. They had served together on the board of the Hartford Police Foundation for 6 years. He stopped. He pulled out his phone. He recorded. He also called 911 to report that a man was being unlawfully detained and gave his name, rank, and the names of the parties involved. The second was Attorney Diane Chu, 52, a partner at Cho & Associates, whose office was directly above the bank branch. She had looked out her window at 9:14 when the patrol car pulled up. She had watched the entire stop from an elevated angle, giving her a direct sightline to Pruitt's body language before he even reached Beaumont. She came downstairs immediately. She identified herself as an attorney. She stood on the sidewalk at a legal distance and stated loudly, clearly, and for the camera, "I am witnessing this stop. My name is Diane Chu. I am an officer of the court. I am recording." Pruitt told her to step back. She said, "I am on a public sidewalk. I am not interfering. I am witnessing. Those are different things." She did not step back. At 9:21 a.m., 4 minutes after the cuffs went on, Pruitt's radio crackled. Tassos, who had retrieved Beaumont's wallet from his jacket pocket at Pruitt's instruction, had run the license and was now standing 6 feet away, holding the wallet open, staring at the business cards inside. He walked to Pruitt and said something quietly. The body camera captured it. "Derek, this is Cornelius Beaumont. I know who he says he is." "No, Derek, look at the cards. He's the chairman of this bank. He's on the police foundation board. Derek, his name is on the building." Pruitt looked at the cards. He looked at the building directory, visible through the glass doors behind them. He looked at Beaumont, standing handcuffed on the sidewalk, perfectly still, saying nothing. He did not remove the cuffs. He did not remove the cuffs for another 9 minutes. In those 9 minutes, Pruitt radioed dispatch and described the stop as a suspicious person and possible threat assessment in progress. He requested a supervisor presence. He walked a slow circle around Beaumont. He asked twice whether Beaumont had any other identification. Beaumont said, "You are holding my wallet. My ID is in my wallet. My name is on the building behind me. I have been standing here for 11 minutes in handcuffs. I am asking you to remove them." At 9:27 a.m., Sergeant Hector Vega, 47, arrived on scene. He took one look at Beaumont, looked at the building directory, looked at Tassos, and said, "What is happening right now?" Tassos said nothing. Pruitt said, "Suspicious person stop." Subject was uncooperative. Sergeant Vega looked at the video being recorded by Colonel Osei, by Attorney Chu, by FedEx driver Marcus Webb, and by the ATM camera across the street. He looked at the body cameras. No, he looked at Cornelius Beaumont standing in handcuffs with his hands behind his back, tie still straight, saying nothing. He said, "Take those off, right now." The cuffs came off at 9:29 a.m. Cornelius Beaumont had been in handcuffs for 12 minutes. He straightened his jacket. He turned to face Officer Pruitt. He said, quietly and without anger, "I'll be speaking with your chief this afternoon." Then he turned, walked through the doors of his bank, took the elevator to his floor, and called his assistant to let her know he would need 5 minutes before the delegation arrived. On the sidewalk behind him, Priya Nair, who had arrived at 9:19, parked behind Tassos's cruiser, watched the entire sequence from her vehicle and never exited, sat in her car for a long time after the scene cleared. Then she drove to the end of the block and parked, and she sat there, thinking about what she had seen, for another 20 minutes. At 11:48 p.m. that night, from her personal cell phone, she called the Connecticut office of the Inspector General's Law Enforcement Whistleblower Hotline. She gave her name, she gave her badge number, she said, "I need to report something I witnessed this morning, and I need to know what protections I have before I say anything else." They told her. She said everything. "If this story matters to you, share it. These cases disappear when people look away. They survive when people don't." At 9:47 a.m., 18 minutes after Cornelius Beaumont walked back into his building, his general counsel, Patricia Ames, placed a call to Hartford Police Department Chief Robert Callahan's direct line, and Callahan's assistant took the message. At 10:03 a.m., Patricia Ames called again and said, "Tell the chief that Cornelius Beaumont is requesting a conversation and that he would like to have it before noon." Callahan called back at 10:09. At 10:12, his voice had changed. At 10:14, He asked his assistant to get the mayor on the line. At 10:17, the mayor's chief of staff called the city attorney. At 10:22, the city attorney called the police department's internal affairs division and said 4 words that the IA commander, Captain Louise Brennan, would later say she had never heard from the city attorney's office before. Pull everything on Pruitt. At 10:31 a.m., Chief Callahan personally arrived at First Covenant Bank's lobby and asked to see Mr. Beaumont. He was taken to the executive floor. He sat across from Cornelius Beaumont, who offered him coffee and did not raise his voice once during a 40-minute meeting, and emerged from that meeting looking, in the words of one junior executive who saw him walk to the elevator, like a man who had just been told the foundation of his house was not attached to the ground. Part 5. The False Report. At 3:30 p.m. on March 14th, Officer Derek Pruitt filed his incident report. It contained the following specific false statements. 1. That the subject had been observed pacing in front of the bank entrance in a manner consistent with pre-robbery surveillance behavior. Security footage from all 4 cameras would show Beaumont standing in one spot for the entirety of the 13 minutes before contact. 2. That the subject refused to produce identification when requested. Body camera footage captured Beaumont explicitly offering identification during the first 90 seconds of the stop. 3. That the subject became verbally aggressive and used profanity. No recording of any kind from any angle captured this. Multiple witnesses would testify the opposite. 4. That the subject was detained briefly for officer safety and released when the matter was resolved without incident. The word handcuffed did not appear anywhere in the report. 5. That Pruitt had acted in accordance with department policy and used the minimum necessary contact to resolve the situation. At 4:15 p.m., Pruitt went to Tassos and told him to keep things simple when he filed his supplemental. Tassos nodded. Then he filed a supplemental that did not contradict Pruitt's report and did not mention the wallet, the business cards, the 9 additional minutes in cuffs, or Sergeant Vega's arrival. At 11:48 p.m., Officer Priya Nair called the Inspector General. The investigation into the false report was opened the following morning. Part 6. The Unraveling. The Connecticut State Police Digital Forensics Unit spent 11 days syncing 4 video sources to a single unified timeline, frame by frame. The result was a 47-minute master file that ran Pruitt's incident report side by side with the footage. The team identified 23 specific points of direct contradiction between the written report and the visual record. Senior investigator Annette Flores, 19 years with the state police, reviewed the master file twice in its entirety. She had spent her career reviewing use-of-force incidents. She had seen bad paperwork. She had seen officers stretch the truth. She had seen genuine disagreements about what a video showed. She had not seen anything like this. She wrote a 1-sentence summary that was subsequently quoted in every legal filing in the case, in both the criminal indictment and the civil complaint, and was later read aloud on the floor of the Connecticut General Assembly. The report filed by Officer Pruitt does not reflect, even charitably, the events recorded by 4 separate and unaffiliated camera systems, and constitutes, in my professional judgment, a deliberate and comprehensive fabrication. The clip that became the most replayed segment of the case, the one played in the grand jury room, the one that was viewable on the every news platform within 48 hours of the footage's release, was captured simultaneously by Pruitt's body camera and the ATM camera across the street. It showed Pruitt 4 minutes into Beaumont's time in handcuffs, leaning toward Tassos and saying, "These people always think a suit changes what you are." 2 camera angles, synced audio, 14 words. The grand jury foreperson would later say that after that clip was played, the room was silent for 45 seconds. Nobody moved, nobody spoke. Then she called for a break. The federal grand jury returned a 3-count indictment against Derek J. Pruitt on May 22nd. Count 1. Deprivation of rights under color of law, 18 U.S.C. Section 242. For the unlawful seizure of Cornelius Beaumont without probable cause, motivated by race. Now, Count 2. Obstruction and false statement in connection with a federal civil rights investigation, 18 U.S.C. Section 1001. For the fabricated incident report. Count 3. Influencing a witness, 18 U.S.C. Section 1512b. For the conversation with Tassos regarding keeping things simple. Pruitt declined all plea offers. He went to trial in October. On day 3 under cross-examination, he testified that the body camera footage had been miscontextualized by the prosecution. He testified that Beaumont had been uncooperative. He testified that his report reflected, to the best of his recollection, what had occurred. The prosecution then played the master file, all 47 minutes, in sequence. The jury deliberated for 6 hours, guilty on all 3 counts. At sentencing, the United States District Judge Marguerite Holloway looked at Derek Pruitt and said, "You did not make an error in judgment on March 14th. You made a series of deliberate choices, to stop a man without cause, to restrain him without justification, to lie about it afterward, and to pressure a colleague to confirm your lie. Each of those choices was a crime. What makes this case singular is not that you committed them. It is that you committed them against a man whose name is on the building, whose contributions fund the very institution you represented, and that, when confronted with irrefutable proof of who he was, you chose to continue anyway. That is not the behavior of an officer who made a mistake. That is the behavior of a man who believed, to his core, that the rules do not apply to him. They do." Derek Pruitt was sentenced to 51 months in federal prison, 3 years of supervised release, and a lifetime ban from employment in any law enforcement, security, or government authority capacity in the United States. 6 weeks after the criminal verdict, the city of Hartford settled the civil rights lawsuit filed by Cornelius Beaumont. The settlement totaled $11.4 million, the largest civil rights settlement in Hartford city history, and the second largest in Connecticut state history. As a condition of settlement, the city agreed to 1. Establish an independent civilian warrant and stop review board with subpoena authority, empowered to review all pedestrian stops and detentions on a quarterly basis. 2. Prohibit any officer with more than 3 sustained complaints from conducting independent pedestrian stops without supervisory accompaniment for a period of no less than 18 months. 3. Commission an annual independent bias audit of all stop data conducted by an external academic institution with published findings made publicly available. 4. Mandate that all complaint history, including dismissed complaints, be reviewed and factored into hiring, promotion, and transfer decisions going forward. 5. Establish a mandatory ethics review for any supervisor who signed off on a dismissal of a complaint later found to reflect a pattern. Cornelius Beaumont directed $4 million of the settlement into the First Covenant Community Economic Justice Fund. That would provide grants to small business owners wrongfully denied financial services due to discriminatory practices. Derek Pruitt began serving his sentence at a federal correctional institution in November. His pension, accrued over 14 years of service, was forfeited under Connecticut state law governing felony conviction of public employees. His wife filed for divorce 3 weeks after the criminal verdict. He will be 46 when he is eligible for release. Officer Glenn Tassos was not criminally charged. He received a 60-day suspension without pay, mandatory retraining, and a permanent notation in his file. He returned to duty in a desk assignment. He has not spoken publicly about the incident. Officer Priya Nair received whistleblower immunity from any departmental action. She received a commendation from the Connecticut Governor's Office for extraordinary integrity under institutional pressure. She transferred at her request to the Hartford PD's Community Engagement Division. She was promoted to detective in the following year. Sergeant Hector Vega, who removed the cuffs and reported the incident accurately, was promoted to lieutenant. His personnel file includes a notation from Chief Callahan. Acted with integrity at significant professional risk. Pruitt's 6 prior supervisors at Hartford PD, who had dismissed complaints against him, faced a departmental review. 3 were demoted, 2 took early retirement under negotiated agreements. 1 was exonerated on the grounds that the complaint files he reviewed were materially incomplete, a finding that triggered a separate audit of the complaint intake process. Colonel Raymond Osei, retired, was formally recognized at a Hartford City Council ceremony in January. The citation read, "For preserving evidence that the system required and might otherwise have lost." Attorney Diane Chu received a commendation from the Connecticut Bar Association for professional conduct in service of civil rights on a public sidewalk. Marcus Webb, the FedEx driver, was offered nothing official. He asked for nothing official. He did say in a brief interview he gave to the Hartford Courant that his mother had called him after the story broke and cried for 20 minutes. That he said, "That was enough for me." Cornelius Beaumont returned to his office the morning after the handcuffs came off, as he had every morning for 11 years. He chaired the board meeting that had been delayed. He greeted the Small Business Alliance delegation, 45 minutes late, with a brief, composed explanation and a sincere apology for the delay. He did not tell them what had happened until they read it in the news. He changed in one specific quiet way. He began spending 30 minutes every Friday morning in the bank's main branch lobby, not in the executive office, not at the board table, but downstairs, at a small table near the window, available to any customer who wanted to speak with him. He said it was something he should have started years ago. He did not explain further. On the steps of Hartford City Hall, that 3 weeks after the criminal verdict and 2 weeks before the civil settlement was announced, Cornelius Beaumont spoke publicly about March 14th for the first and only extended time. He spoke for 8 minutes without notes. He did not speak in anger. He thanked Colonel Osee, Attorney Chu, and Marcus Webb by name. He thanked Officer Nair without using her name because she had asked him not to. She was still an active officer and preferred, she had told him, to be useful rather than famous. He acknowledged that Chief Callahan had acted quickly once the facts were before him, and he said that acknowledgement was not absolution, but it was honest. He talked about his father's hand. He said that Elwood Beaumont lost that finger in a machine that should have had a guard, and that the machine didn't have a guard because it was expensive to retrofit, and that the company's calculation was that the cost of retrofitting was greater than the cost of what might happen to the man running it. He said that calculation had a name. He said that name was not a slur and not a conspiracy. He said that name was ordinary institutional indifference to the cost of harm, and that it was the most dangerous force he had encountered in 58 years. He said he was not going to ask the city to feel sorry for him. He said he was not going to tell anyone what to feel. He said what happened to him happened to people without his name, his building, his board seat, and his lawyers, every day, and that those people deserved the same outcome he was receiving and did not get it. And that the only honest response to that fact was to build systems that did not require a person to be the chairman of anything in order to be treated as a human being. He said the word accountability 4 times. He said the word reform 3 times. He said the word dignity once, near the end. He did not use the word justice until the final sentence. He said, "What happened to me on that sidewalk was a crime. What I want, what this city now has the opportunity to choose, is not revenge for that crime, and not merely compensation for that crime, but the actual structural, enforceable, audited, and honest work of making sure that the next person who stands on that sidewalk receives, without qualification and without requiring a name on a building, and something this city has always claimed to believe in, which is justice." He stepped back from the podium. He did not take questions. He went back to work. The 8 words that ended his statement, something this city has always claimed to believe in, were used as the title of an essay written by a 14-year-old student at Hartford's Bulkley High School that won the Connecticut Youth Civic Writing Award that spring. Those same 8 words were incorporated into a slide in the Federal Law Enforcement Bias Training Curriculum, Module 7, The Cost of Assumption, distributed to every municipal police department in Connecticut the following year, and they were engraved at Cornelius Beaumont's own expense on a small bronze plaque affixed to the exterior wall of First Covenant Bank's headquarters, at eye level, beside the main entrance, on the sidewalk where he had stood. He put it there so that the next person who stood in that spot would know that someone else had stood there too, and had not disappeared.